Morning, everyone. Yesterday, well, the MP stuck up his middle finger while participating in question period remotely on Friday. I thought this was kind of funny. Alberta MP apologizes for use of middle finger during question period. Our politics, eh? Here we go.
Policies have been an assault on Alberta and the West. They've made resource extraction more difficult, less profitable, and highly uncertain. They've outright canceled already approved projects that would have provided much needed market diversification and access. They've done nothing for our farmers and producers at a time of tremendous need and difficulty. They've attacked our plastic manufacturers and are even getting in the way of Alberta becoming a plastic recycling hub. Mr. Speaker, why doesn't the Prime Minister just show the West what he truly thinks of us, just like his father did?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I apologize.
Here's the apology.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my colleague's intervention. It is not uncommon for people to be able to wave or to use their hand gestures in the House of Commons. If there is a particular hand gesture that I have used that has been offensive to someone, then I unreservedly withdraw that gesture.
I withdraw the gesture. And really, like, he was like this kind of, you know. I mean, if you're gonna do it, fuddle duddle Canada, right? That was the he was making fun of Trudeau, kind of like he was using Trudeau's dad's fuddle duddle Canada thing, right? That's what he was doing. So, you know, I don't know. He's trying to make a point. He apologized and removed it, whatever. So I think it was more of a funny little aside than anything else. Moving on, Health Minister Patty Haydew's dismissal of more access to government records disappoints Information Commissioner. So, Patty Haydew, this part of this fight is getting records about spending, and part of the reason we need records about spending is because from the scandal to the ventilator scandal, where a former Liberal MP got a no-bid contract for ventilators that aren't approved in any jurisdiction and that are more expensive than their approved counterparts. Why did that company get that contract, right? Like, all of that, we need the documents. And if we can't get to the documents for like 6 or 7 years because of the pandemic, well, that's going to be a big problem, because how do you have accountability from a government that can't even produce documents, right? How could you trust that government? How could you trust a government that can't produce documents requested to continue to govern the country properly? What if somebody else requests documents? Like, the Canadian people, the people who employ you, want the documents, and you can't produce them for, 6 years or something like that? That's okay, but what about maybe your other vendors or other people who are trying to deal with you? Are they dealing with those kind of delays as well? And I don't think that that's appropriate. I certainly don't think it's appropriate for the Minister of Health to say nobody's asked for me to put resources into that. And she got there's a Twitter account, House of Commons staffer, who says, "Hey, Patty Haydew," and this was a tweet from yesterday. Maybe I should show it, but I'm not going to. He said, "Here's hundreds of people who have replied to my tweet about wanting you to put money into this, so maybe you should put money into this." And the end of the article tells what the story about that is. So it's very interesting how dismissive this minority government is of the people it serves. Okay. The Federal Information Ombudsman says she's disappointed by Health Minister Patty Haydew's comments dismissing the need to bolster access to government records. Haydew rebuffed a Conservative MP's call Thursday for release of federal records on the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, saying no Canadian has asked her to give more resources to the official who processes access to information requests. I scroll down a little bit. Information Commissioner Caroline Maynard, tweeted Friday that she is very disappointed by the statement, given that she has sounded the alarm on a need for more resources to get the documents out the door during the pandemic. The Conservatives present a motion in the Commons calling for the release of a wide array of government records about actions concerning COVID-19. Haydew responded in a series of tweets late Friday saying that the government has, quote, additional staff assigned to support Canadians' access to information requests during the pandemic. She added that she will speak to Maynard to ensure we continue to respond to Canadians' access to information requests. So, I mean, at least the public shaming kind of worked. And I think it will work with these Liberals because they're desperate to be liked. And, I mean, look at how much money they've paid the press to report well on them, right? Like, they desperately, desperately want to be liked. And if people point out their sheer idiocy, right? If they just point it out and say, like, here, maybe they'll do something. Probably not. Probably not. Probably they'll just ignore you. Here is Randy Hiller, and he says, No matter where you turn, all you can find is COVID-19 contradictions. Our government, Ford Nation, public health, local health units, and our hospitals cannot help but conflict on the facts. Are they trying to keep us scared and confused? You tell me. Ford failed the people. So on the left-hand side, it says COVID contradictions, Ottawa Health Unit versus Ottawa Hospital. On the left-hand side, Ottawa Health System is in crisis, Dr. Etches says, amid 142 new coronavirus cases. This is October 2nd. It says, I have something really important that I need you to hear. Our health system is in crisis. In the underline, it says, lest the city's healthcare infrastructure collapse. Collapse! They use collapse. I'm sounding the alarm. This is our warning bell. With this spike, we have entered crisis territory, she says. And it says, Denley, no, the Ottawa Hospital isn't overloaded. No, the health system isn't collapsing. Oh, well, yay. This is from 12 days ago, October 6th, or not 12 days ago necessarily, 12 days ago from when this picture was taken. It says, Dr. Etches says the healthcare system is not on the verge of collapse from increasing COVID-19 case volume. The Ottawa chief medical officer's frightening assertion is not in sync with the reality at the Ottawa Hospital, TOH. I scroll down a little bit. Over the last few weeks, there have been no more than 2 COVID-19 patients in intensive care at Toronto, or at TOH. So I think that is very interesting. Yesterday, I talked about capacity, and thank you very much. Oh, I've got your name here. Hold on. I had it up. Thank you for sending this link in, Gala. And the link was basically asked, what is our capacity? What can we handle? And here's the capacity, right? This was from April 16th, and it says hospitals across the province have taken steps to make more beds available for COVID-19 patients in every region of the province. As a result, Ontario has a total of 20,354 acute care beds, with a potential for an additional 4,205 more acute beds by April 30th, 2020. Of Ontario's 3,504 critical care beds, 2,811 are now equipped with ventilators, up from 1,319 when the outbreak first started. Okay, so that's a lot. Like, we've got 4,000 additional beds, 20,000 beds, and 3,504 critical care beds with 2,811 ventilators. What numbers are making us have these reports? 276 in hospital, 76 in the ICU, 47 on a ventilator. Does that seem like it's in line with what we need to be doing? It seems like we've got quite a lot of potentially room in the hospitals. It seems like schools have been open for more than 6 weeks and nothing's really bad has happened. No massive outbreaks, no entire schools full of people infected, no scores of dead teachers or scores of dead grandparents that I've seen, right? From being traced to the child picking up the disease at home and then taking it to their grandparent or something to that effect. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We're destroying our economy for this. Like, understand that we're destroying our economy for this. And we're surrendering our freedoms. Having a test is only as good as you've not interacted with anybody else, right? Like, you go and get a test and you're free and clear until you've gone to Walmart, right? Right? Like, at that point, you could be infected again. So say the conflicting health officials. So surrendering your freedom to this boogeyman of the virus, well, people are getting sick of it. People are saying this is not what we signed up for. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and now we're 8 months later, and we're being told maybe in 2022. Get bent, Doug Ford. Get bent, Justin Trudeau. I don't think so. And the reason that I don't think so is because I have eyes and can look around. Do you know what I see? I see a bunch of scared people wearing masks, ignoring the fact that the cases are spiking. Does wearing masks prevent cases? Yeah? No? Does wearing masks impact healthy people's health? Yes, it does. Okay, but I don't want to get too waylaid here because I'm getting waylaid. Mr. Polyev says the failure to approve rapid testing for safe travel and tourism will cost Canada a gobsmacking 500,000 jobs. Astonishing damage. And Paul Vieira says Canada's virus-induced travel restrictions, such as closing land border to the U.S. tourists and Atlantic Canada's so-called bubble, to cost economy up to $37 billion Canadian and 550,000 jobs in 2020, according to StatsCan, on WSJ's it's a Wall Street Journal article. But fundamentally, if you close down the Atlantic Canada and stop tourism and stop everything, that's going to be impactful for the airline industries. It's going to therefore directly impact the airline industries, making making flights there, it doesn't make business sense to continue that, right? And so they stopped flights there, right? So I mean, I'm impacted by that. That's not great. And when are we getting back? When is the plan to get back to normal, to be able to have flights there and not have, to be able to fly to parts of our country and not have to quarantine for 14 days? I say again, we've got lots and lots of capacity. We've got lots of capacity, right? And presumably this is repeated everywhere. And it is. I'll show you, because there are other places in the world that are done with this too. But if that's true, then why are we destroying our economy? Right? There's got to be another reason. There has to be something else going on. Here is Madison Van Kessel, and she is responding to a CP24 tweet of founder of GTA chain restaurant says his business may not survive next 60 days without government help. Government help? How about just without letting us open and be a business, without allowing us to run our business? You cannot replace a business with government bailout loans that are basically being forced on people to continue the growth of the quantitative easing that we're doing, right? The printing of money, right? We're not printing money. Anyway, Madison says, in Peel Region Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Lawrence Lowe has said that he is not aware of any outbreaks that have been traced back to bars and restaurants. So bars and restaurants are being punished. So are gyms, so are dance studios, so are all sorts of other small businesses that employ people that are hard to get running and can't be run on loans. If you have bills and no revenue, if you have expenses and no revenue, you have bills, not a business. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is an expensive bill to have, right? Like, this real estate is expensive. What happens when this business goes under and the landlord can't make the rent, right? Who buys the building, right? Some people have been saying the insurance stuff is a land grab. I could see that, right? If you can't insure a bunch of houses that are uninsurable according to the insurance agency, or the insurance would cost so much that you have to sell, who are you going to sell to? Somebody offering top dollar. Why are they buying? Because you can't insure the house, right? They're going to knock it down and do something else with it. Anyway, interesting stuff happening all over Canada. We're going to talk about the fisheries stuff as well today. Finally, right? Lori Goldstein says Premier Ford's stock answer on this. This is back to the businesses that have bills and not a business. They just have bills. Premier Ford's stock answer on this is becoming absurd. Is there anyone at Ford's command table representing small businesses and the utter carnage that's going on in the economic sector? This is in response to Robert Benzie reporting Premier Doug Ford says, I have to listen to the health professionals more than restaurateurs like Mark McEwen and close businesses to curb the spread. I go back to this, Mr. Ford. I go back to this. We've got capacity. Hire some people. If the problem is people, we don't have enough people to staff it, hire some people, right? Like, honestly, apparently the money taps mean absolutely nothing. So turn them on, I guess, right? Like, Yahtzee, right? I guess it doesn't matter. Back to Mr. Goldstein. He says public health officials will always argue for a maximum degree of lockdown in a pandemic. That's fine. That's their job. But Ford has an obligation to weigh other social concerns or societal concerns, the economy, suicide, drug abuse prevention, elective surgery, in making his decision. Only ideologues believe the solution to COVID-19 is to either open everything up or close everything down. The only sensible way forward is a balanced approach using expert advice from all sectors of Canadian and Ontario society, not just the public health sector. Here's the thing, though. The experts have been just wrong. The experts have been so wrong that why would you trust them? They are telling you that wearing a mask is protecting you from something it cannot possibly protect you from. It does not reduce any kind of risk, in my opinion. And I am more than allowed to have my opinion, YouTube. So the irresponsible pushing of this from the experts, in my opinion, is disqualifying them from being taken seriously around this business-destroying decision-making process and procedure that we're going through in Ontario. And here is Robert Ferguson. It says, compared with Ontario's 826 new cases and 9 deaths, Michigan reports 1,826 new cases and 18 deaths. This is going to put us into lockdown. These kind of numbers are going to put us into lockdown. And the more we test, the higher the numbers are going to get. And deaths are measured by Toronto Public Health as people with COVID, not necessarily people who have died of COVID. So again, these numbers are as suspect can be, and I don't know how anybody could be making their decisions to ruin people's businesses, to ruin people's ability to generate revenue, to destroy their livelihoods, because that's what's happening. It's a very slow motion burn, but it is a burn. To do that on these numbers is just unbelievable. And there's further consequences, right? Here's the Toronto Star reporting. Ontario shut down non-urgent health services in the spring. Now hospitals are seeing many more patients with advanced cancers, right? Ontario shut down non-urgent health services. So now people didn't get the early screenings, didn't get the early interventions, and now their treatments are going to be either much more expensive to get the same result they could have gotten had we caught it early, or their life is that much shorter, right? Because we didn't catch it early enough to impact and save their, years, their time. The earlier you catch something, sometimes the better it is, right? Sometimes it doesn't matter. Rex Glacier is saying the federal government is spending $173 million to help Medicago develop the vaccine and build a large plant in Quebec to produce it. What a great deal. They don't even have a plant to make it, but we're taxpayers are going to pay them to build a plant for a drug they don't have and doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. We're spending a lot of money on something that doesn't exist. And the MERS and the SARS vaccine were not promising at all. This is getting to the point where other places are done with this. Here's the Welsh government. It says COVID-19. The Welsh government has reduced the number of ICU beds that are available in Welsh hospitals by 119 beds during a pandemic. This is I saw a tweet yesterday as well in Wales talking about having 3 people in the ICU and 80 cases and them being upset that there was a lockdown. And I thought this was that tweet, but I'm not going to go find it now. So I'll put it in the description if I can find it later. Here's Naples. Naples is done. Well, there's two clips I'll show you of Naples. I'll show that one second. Here's the first one. I'm going to turn the volume down and then build it slowly. Slowly. I don't think that that's video of a population that is terrified of the virus. That's a population that's sick and tired of their government. Here is a Forbes article on it. Apparently Twitter was scrubbing these videos, but I mean, I found these 2 videos easily. So Naples riots against lockdown threat record COVID-19 cases in Italy. COVID-19 cases in Italy. Here's a second video I want to show you. This isn't ideal. Like, this isn't where we want to get to, right? But if somebody had told you 6 months ago that this is what Italy was going to degenerate into, would you believe them, right? 3.5 million people who arrived in Canada since March exempted from the quarantine requirement. More than 4.6 million people have arrived in Canada since the border closed last March, but less than 1/4 of them were ordered to quarantine. The rest were deemed essential and exempt from the requirement. Essential travelers include truck drivers, airline crew members, healthcare workers, members of the military, people living in border communities who need to perform everyday functions in Canada, and people Ottawa deems essential to managing the pandemic. Healthcare workers don't have to quarantine? Isn't that interesting? Because they're probably, exposed. Why wouldn't they have to quarantine? Back to this. Of those 3.5 million were considered essential, 1.1 million people were non-essential travelers in order to quarantine. So if you weren't in that list, and or somehow there was the CEO of Costco who was essential apparently, so he was allowed to go to a bunch of store openings and stuff. But back to this. Health Canada data on 80% of the confirmed cases to date show about 4.4% of the total number of positive cases of COVID-19 in the country involved recent travelers or people who came into contact with them. It's very interesting, the inconsistent rules, and that's kind of the theme of this. The inconsistent rules are reliably inconsistent. Here's going in a little bit of a different direction. There's like 3 more stories. This one's a short one, and we've got the fisheries one coming up. But this one, the Liberal government's own internal polling has found that the percentage of Canadians who consider climate change their top priority has plummeted to just 2.5%. Very interesting. That's an epic collapse. I think they all live in Guelph. CTV Kitchener says students attending classes in the Waterloo District School Board are being asked to not dress up for Halloween this year. I'd dress my kid up anyway. Forget it. Oh, I didn't know that there were rules against having clothing on at school. Are you gonna strip him down? No, you're gonna send him home. All right, he can spend the rest of the day at home. Honestly. And in 2019, they tried to do this, and there was a bunch of pushback from parents. And now they're using the pandemic as the excuse. I'm telling you, as a parent, you have more power than you think. Call your school and tell your principal, I'm sending my kid in, and blah, blah, blah. Deal with it. And they're not wearing a mask. Enough said. Okay. For Acadian fishermen, early Micmac, somebody said that I've been mispronouncing this wrong. I never mispronounce anything on purpose. I'm just really bad at reading names, so I apologize. I'm not meaning to be racist or insensitive to the name. I'm just reading it poorly, so I apologize. And they sent me how to say it, and I can't find the chat, so I apologize. I looked. I was looking, and I looked. I had Google tell me how to say it, but it sounded like what I was saying, so sorry. Anyway, for Acadian fishermen, early Micmac fishery in Nova Scotia can never be respected. So at the beginning of this, it's interesting. It sets it up. Well, this article sets the stakes for the fishing outside of the commercial, the approved commercial timeline. And this one is asking the commissioner, the RCMP commissioner, to resign because of racism, because she's allowing this stuff to continue happening because they have a right to fish during this time. So we'll start here. This stock has been building up for 150 years, and my grandfather, my father, and myself, we sat at the table with governments. We made rules to have a livelihood for our kids and our grandkids, he said during an interview this week at his workshop in Medellin, a largely French-speaking town on St. Mary's Bay. In a few more years, what we worked for will be gone. And he didn't exactly say that. He said, what we worked for, ... will be gone. So the news can insert or remove a lot from that. Okay, beware. I scroll down. Meanwhile, he says the atmosphere in the community has descended into one of mistrust and fear since the tension exploded into burning and vandalism. You don't know who to talk to. People are scared. As Acadians, we never used to be like that. LeBlanc argues the distress of the indigenous fishery is driven in part by perceptions the federal fisheries department will not listen to his people's concerns. In particular, LeBlanc cites the second part of the 1999 ruling in the Donald Marshall Jr. case, when the court clarified that the federal fisheries department retains the right to regulate based on conservation and consultation with the treaty right holders. In his view, this suggests the indigenous fishery must be regulated and occur alongside the roughly 80 to 90 commercial lobster harvesters that ply the bay from late November until spring. We all have indigenous blood. We've always worked side by side. The Acadians are not racist. We know they, the indigenous fishers, have rights, but we can't respect what's happening in St. Mary's Bay. We never will, he said. He cites, okay. Sorry about that. I missed reading this top part. Anyway, the threat perceived by LeBlanc is the launch of a lobster fishery by another First Nation in September, with the ban citing the 1999 Supreme Court of Canada's 1999 ruling that the East Coast Indigenous nations have the right to earn a moderate livelihood from their catch. In the weeks that followed, Indigenous traps were cut, a boat burned, vehicles were destroyed, and one lobster pound that handles Indigenous catch was damaged while another was burned down. The actions of groups of up to 200 people have drawn condemnation from across party lines in Parliament. As he weaves his ropes into loops, the 61-year-old LeBlanc says he did not participate in the violence, but adds it may have been worse if not for behind-the-scene efforts to restrain it. The main problem with what the fisheries are doing is here. LeBlanc said comparisons between the tightly focused indigenous fishery and the commercial fishing effort in vast coastal areas known as Licensed Fisheries Area 34, where over 900 non-indigenous fishers have up to 400 traps each, is misleading. I know they're saying we're only taking 1% of the stock, but they're not saying the indigenous fishers are taking it in a 4 square mile area of the bay, he said. He says lobsters migrate into the bay's inner areas in early summer, shed and regrow their shells, and then begin their movement further back offshore. Having a moderate livelihood early fall fishery in the midst of this pattern casts a shadow over the long-term future of the stock, he argues, adding it remains unknown how large it will eventually become. So he cites the recent decline in St. Mary's Bay between 2016 and 19, as the Federal Fisheries Department has noted the catch in the bay fell from 1,691 tons to 915 tons over the 3-year period, a decrease of 46%. At the same time, the number of commercial vessels fishing the bay dropped from 76 to 76 from 95. I scroll down a little bit. LeBlanc said, Peace on the water will only come with a moratorium on fishing outside of the existing commercial season. He says 8 years ago, he started to notice a growth in the separate indigenous fishery known as food, social, and ceremonial, which occurred as a result of a separate Supreme Court decision on treaty rights. This fishery, which occurred outside of the commercial season, didn't permit sale or barter of the lobster, but LeBlanc said it's well known sales were occurring, and he started to lose faith in the lobster stock's health. There's no longer a future in St. Mary's Bay, and it's absolutely sickening to those who have been here all these years. So that's one side, and here's the other. RCMP Commissioner must resign, Assembly of First Nations chief says. Assembly of First Nations Chief Perry Belgrade is calling for the resignation of RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki after she defended the actions of officers in Nova Scotia. Mr. Belgrade said he expressed to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that his national advocacy organization has lost confidence in the RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki. I scroll down. I'm asking the Prime Minister to remove Commissioner Lucki and to replace her with someone who will focus their attention on public safety and combating racism, he says. Scroll down a bit. The National Chief's call for the commissioner's removal comes after several Indigenous leaders expressed concern that officers stood by during recent violence and intimidation aimed at a Mi'kmaq fishery and community members. Tensions have escalated with non-Indigenous fishers who take issue with the Mi'kmaq fishery operating outside the regulated fishing season. Mi'kmaq leaders say they are allowed to do so under a 1999 Supreme Court decision that affirms their right to fish for a moderate livelihood. Criticism of the RCMP from Indigenous leaders includes that the force failed to stop an angry mob that attacked the two rural storage facilities holding Mi'kmaq lobster catches and threw rocks and set a van on fire. When asked about calls for Commissioner Lucki's removal on Friday, Mr. Trudeau would say only that he has heard concerns from many Canadians about the functioning of the National Police Force. He also said the government will work with the Commissioner to continue to keep Canadians safe. I scroll down. In the throne speech on September 23rd, the Liberal government also promised changes to address systemic racism and to move forward on recognition with Indigenous peoples, including a pledge to reform the RCMP and modernize training for police and law enforcement. I think that it's interesting that they're framing this as racism, as both sides, I believe, like as far as I understand, one side is Indigenous too, and they're saying that we need to respect the breeding grounds and the regeneration grounds of the lobster, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I don't know. It seems reasonable to me to say let's all fish during commercial fishing season and that way, right? But hey, maybe what once was reasonable is now unreasonable. Did you see that Tampax tweet? Check out my Twitter if you're interested in the Tampax tweet. Really wild stuff. Okay, we can't deal with Wang Mengzhou. We can't deal with holding China accountable on like any of the bad behavior that we've seen in the last couple of months. But Uyghur Muslims, right? This is a genocide. So says here's the secretary, parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Justice. Here we go.
I had the opportunity to work with the United Nations, prosecuting crimes against humanity and genocide at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. The legal standard for establishing genocide is a high one, as it must be for the most heinous crime known to humanity. I'm saddened to indicate that it is genocide which appears to be taking place today in China. A set of studies by the Subcommittee on International Human Rights demonstrates clearly that 2 million Uyghur Muslims are being detained in modern-day concentration camps, unable to speak their language or practice their faith. This is the largest mass detention of a community since the Holocaust. What's more, Uyghur Muslims are being subjected to horrific abuses, including forced sterilization and abortions. The UN Genocide Convention is clear. When you impose measures intended to prevent births within a group, you are committing an act of genocide.
So unequivocally, very clearly, and I just find it interesting how strong language they're using here to hold China accountable over this. And these actions require people to be held accountable. Good job. I'm not saying that they don't, but I just find it interesting that this is the only thing that strong language and holding China accountable over, right? Isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting? Here's Globe and Mail. Parliamentary Committee calls China's mistreatment of Uyghurs genocide, urges Ottawa to sanction Beijing officials. So it's a parliamentary committee urging Ottawa. Okay, link is in the description to check it out. And I wasn't going to include this. I was just going to end on that. But if you live in the Kawartha Lakes, there were military helicopters flying overhead on the 21st. And apparently it was just a training exercise. No problem. Go back to sleep, citizen. Very interesting stuff happening in our world. I don't know. And the U.S. election happening just what, next week? The 3rd? Wild, right? That's happening super fast. And who knows? Who knows what's going to come out of that? I think that probably Trump will win. But that's going to impact certain stuff in Canada, right? Another 4 years of Trump. Have to deal with Trudeau's super awesome management of that. And other concerns, right? Other things that re-election would entail, that re-election would trigger. Very interesting. I'm interested to see what happens. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co and have a wonderful, and check out SpeakingWisely.co and have a wonderful, wonderful day.